Hello, climbers, and welcome to Climbing Mount CMMC. Back to the basics.
Good job.
Where is it going? Looks sky.
Hello, climbers, and welcome back to another episode of Climbing Mount CMMC, the podcast. My name is Kaleigh Floyd, and this is Bobby Guerra, and we are your hosts for Climbing Mount CMMC. We are a part of an MSP called Axiom that is CMMC Level 2 certified and trying to figure out all of this CMMC stuff. Is that the best way to explain it?
Yeah, that's a technical term.
It's a
CMMC
short
stuff.
CMMC stuff. Go ahead and look at it in 32 CFR. No, but we are going to be talking about a very interesting phrase that pertains to 32 CFR as well as just the CMMC ecosystem as a whole. You're going to see it in a few different places, and we're going to talk about it today, which is significant changes. Okay, for those of you guys who are not aware, for CMMC level 2 requirements, you have to go through, well, many of them require a third-party assessment organization to come in and assess your company's information system to see if it is meeting the NIST 800-171 Rev 2 controls and assessment objectives. So it would be very unfortunate if something had occurred that would make you have to do it again, even sooner than you have to, which you have to do this every 3 years. Now, we're going to talk about this significant change that was brought up in 32 CFR final rule and kind of dropped a bomb on people of like, hold on a second, are you telling me that sometime during this 3-year period, if maybe I make some type of change that I'm going to have to get reassessed by a C3PAO all over again before the 3 years even happens? And the answer is yes. But guess what? They didn't tell you what those significant changes were. They made it a bit vague here. And we're going to talk about what they gave us in 32 CFR. And we're going to talk about what they gave us most recently in a DOW FAQ that talks more specifically about significant changes. Then lastly, we're going to talk about how Bobby spiraled about this discussion of what it all means based upon what they said in this FAQ and what they said in 32 CFR.
Right. Because I think it's, the cost of the assessment is not cheap. And to
it's
just
not for fun.
to operationally make changes as you go to work and operate, that all of a sudden now you have to go through a new assessment. And it's easy to fall into that. Some examples of what most people are referring to as significant changes could be a merger and acquisition, right? So you are acquiring another company.
It
right?
does list this specifically.
Yeah.
I will say that one of the significant changes that it calls out directly is a merger or acquisition.
Maybe the change of the way your organization works, and you want to include a physical location that was not in scope during your initial assessment. So say, for example, you had 5 locations and now you decide you want to manufacture and do some other components, another part of a different location in another part of the country, and the cage code was not originally listed in your CMMC assessment. If during a DIPCAC assessment, they find that you are conducting your CMMC activities in systems that are not authorized in your CMMC UID. In other words, when you get assessed, they attach the cage codes to those, which binds these areas that are authorized. You're basically defining, like Kaleigh said, your information system. That's the information system now that is authorized to contain that CUI. And if it's another location that's not on those cage codes or lists, you are violating your DFARS clauses. And that's a real problem, or could be, that you don't want to fall into.
I feel like if everybody had a chance to listen to Corinne Wise's discussion that she did, even we listened to it at KuiCon of mergers and acquisitions, and also she talked with a guy named Jacob. I can't remember his last name, but maybe I can link it below if I find it. He's hidden under a rock. I couldn't find him. So they were talking about a lot of people think that a CMMC assessment is done for a company and not the actual system. The information system, and it applies. Right. That's where you're talking about. It's important to know what those cage codes are that are represented in that information system and what's accessing it, what's a part of the environment. And then if there are significant changes, which we'll talk more about that to that information system, not necessarily the company as a whole, but that information system, that could be potentially a significant change that would require an assessment, a reassessment.
Switching MSPs would be typically most people find as a significant change, right?
Yeah.
Other people that would tell you if during your assessment you didn't have printing or physical media included, and now you do, significant change. They're gonna come at you and say to do
Well,
that.
that's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and so here's the problem: is if you ask 3 different C3POs, you might get 3 different answers. So how do you address that?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So let's start by talking about 32 CFR final rule, which will be linked below if you want to go to that document directly. But we're going to talk about specifically the phrase significant architectural and boundary changes. So here in this part of 32 CFR, it says CMMC level 2 self-assessments, level 2 certification assessments, and level 3 certification assessments are valid for defined CMMC assessment scopes, and they're outlined in it references the part that it's outlined in for the CMMC scoping process. Then it says a new CMMC assessment may be required if significant architectural or boundary changes are made to the previous assessment scope. Here's examples. Examples include, but are not limited to, expansions of networks or mergers and acquisitions. Now, I think expansions of networks, I think what you said about printing is a great example of an expansion of a
Yeah.
network. Operational changes within an assessment scope, such as adding or subtracting resources within the existing assessment boundary that follow the existing SSP. I think that's an important part, that follow the existing SSP do not require a new assessment, but
Mhm.
rather are covered by annual affirmations to the continuing compliance requirements. So it talks there about what annual affirmations are for. This brings up the change control process. There's a whole process that's baked
Yeah.
into CMMC requirements that allows for change. Okay, so we're not saying no change is allowed. Heary, like you cannot change your system at all, but rather there's boundaries, right, for these types of changes. And so I do think that emphasizing the part that I said previously, which is following the existing SSP, also brings up the topic that you said, Bobby, of MSPs. If your MSPs are written into your SSP in certain ways, their CRM is connected, I would say that's a pretty significant change because it adjusts and adapts a lot of your SSP, right?
Yep. Yep.
What other examples you want to give for this before we move on to the FAQ?
I think changing boundaries inside your environment could put you in danger for those types of situations. For example, say that you were doing backups in one facility and you completely changed it to another. Could that fall in that boundary? I would think probably not if you're keeping the same backup solution or you're doing those types of things. This is where, and I know we're going to get into this more, if you start to get in those gray areas, keeping that relationship to your C3PO so you can talk with them about what they would perceive as that significant change is important. Keep in mind, the C3PO gets to make money off of you going through a reassessment. So you would want to make sure that you're picking a C3PO that you feel like they're not in it to win it for them, that they would have
that
a
they'll speak
fair,
honestly.
a fair and honest conversation with you about it. Because keep in mind too, if they do handle that, then they're securing the reassessment with you again in 3 years. So they could be hurting their future plans for assessments if they don't really conduct themselves appropriately in that manner. So
Yes.
that's something to think about. But it's also just puts a little bit more of an emphasis on keeping that relationship with the C3PO because you might have to call. Now, they can't consult you, but they can tell you whether the changes that you're doing would warrant a reassessment potentially,
Yeah.
and they might have to ask additional questions about it.
Yeah. Yeah. If they couldn't say that, I don't know how this would happen. Truly.
Yeah.
If they couldn't give their opinion on this, it would be very odd. So let's switch and talk about the most recent update of this significant change. Okay. So for those of you guys who are not aware, there was a new CMMC FAQ that was posted about a week ago. and it addressed some comments and questions regarding CMMC requirements. One of those was, what qualifies as significant change? As a significant change that would require an OSA to undergo a new evaluation under the CMMC program. So this is an excellent question. Now, it does talk about 3-year assessment cycle, annual affirmations, but I do think that one of the big important parts that it leads off with in this FAQ is the decision of whether a change is significant enough to require a reassessment is the responsibility of the affirming official who bears the legal and contractual risk of continued compliance and may benefit from consultation with authorized independent consultants. Do you want to describe to somebody who's listening that might not know what an affirming official is?
Yeah, the affirming official is the person that has the chutzpah inside the organization to sign on the dotted line around legal documents. So that would be like your C-suite type people that are authorized to make those legal decisions that could impact them and bring them into either safer or unsafe waters. For example, deciding this doesn't constitute a significant change, so I'm not even going to consult the C3PO. We're just going to do it. And then you wing it come the 3 year shows up and the C3P walks in the door and they look at the change and go, what the crap? And that could be a real problem. They have to live with the consequences of that decision is what they're basically saying.
Right.
And the consequence could be up to the point that they could fail their upcoming assessment. So it's pay me now or pay me later if you don't really pay attention. So that's where paying close attention to those types of consequences is very important. So if you're the affirming official for your organization, you have almost a fiduciary responsibility to keep track of those types of changes that may fall into that.
Yep.
So having a relationship with either an MSP that understands what significant changes look like or having a consultant on hand, which is sort of what it's talking about there, might be a good idea. But I also highly recommend talking with your C3PO, because if that's the people that are going to reassess you, if they look at that and go, oh, that's not a significant change, I mean, how could they come back and fail you later unless you didn't share all the details that they discover during the assessment? It would be pretty tough, in my opinion. So, I mean, that's kind of what I think about. But it's really interesting is if you read further, it has some more, it puts some more teeth into this statement, which I found really, really interesting.
Yeah. Well, it proceeds to say after that, security requirements that address changes. So it talks about CUI flow through the environment, AC 3.1.3, actively manage changes, CM 3.4.3, CM 3.4.4. It even talks about conducting risk assessments, RA 3.11.1. Plan of actions to reduce or eliminate deficiencies and vulnerabilities, 3.12.2, monitor security controls continuously, CA policy 3.12.3, and update, not to be more vague, but update the system security plan, CA 3.12.4.
Right.
But underneath this, I think something that's really cool that it says that brings up, I think, what you were talking about previously is a reassessment is required if any security requirement or assessment objective was assessed as NA, so not applicable, or assessed as met by virtue of NA, but after a change is now applicable since that security requirement or assessment objective has never been assessed. So
you
I
said
think
we don't have wireless in our network. Now you do.
Now you do.
Yeah.
That's a change.
And true or false? CMMC has a Delta assessment. There is no Delta assessment. You have to go through all of it.
Wouldn't that be cool if it did?
That'd be so cool if they did, but they don't. So that's why you got to make sure you pay really close attention, start looking over the horizon when you do your scoping and design of your system. Because if a year or two later, you're like, you know what, I want to add wireless and I want to bring the physical facility into scope because now we're printing and we want to do this. Well, say hello to a new assessment. And in that FAQ, it more clearly defines and you need to follow your change management process. So they want to see that you go through the change management process, you accept the risks or go through those things, and then you implement the change, and then you go through the reassessment. They want to see all of that happen as kind of like part of your system security plan. I mean, that's well within the guise of the system that you should have already established, that you should be capable,
Yes.
hopefully, of following, because that's what they assessed. So you should have the mechanisms in place to implement those changes and then follow through with the reassessment. And that's what they're looking for. And they're providing additional clarity so that you could see that in certain scenarios. Because you get together with a group of people and they don't want to do something, I'm sure they can figure out a way to talk themselves into how they don't have to do that, even though that's not the reality. So
Yeah.
I think they wisely suggest in there, seek outside counsel just to get outside of your echo chamber, because you could be leading yourself down a path of destruction only to be found out much later. And then you have to go through contractual remediations, right? So if the C3PO comes in and finds it, and then they fail you because you didn't go through those and haven't addressed them correctly, then you could end up going through contractual remediations where you could lose your contracts, or you're not able to get reassessed and addressed in the time frame that you have, and you're not able to renew your C3PO level 3 or level 2 assessment, right? So let's say you wait till 2 or 3 months before your affirmation deadline runs out on your 3-year certificate that you have, your certification of that you passed, and then you realize you made some significant changes and you don't have enough time to make the adjustments to then get it reassessed and revalidated in the right way. You could lose your window, and then you'll overrun the runway and not be able to get and you could have a gap in your official level 2. And if you don't report that to the contracts that you have, DFAR says you have to. Like if you're not in compliance, you have to report that to them. And if you don't do that, then you're lying. So that's another problem that could come back to haunt you as well.
Right. In the last section of this FAQ, like the last part of this FAQ section talking about significant changes, it does say, and I think this is talking about what you were saying of keeping track using the change control process and adhering to that when these changes are occurring still. It is important to consider that the next 3-year assessment will evaluate whether each of these changes have been properly managed according to CMMC security requirements and performed as stated in the SSP. Failure to significantly demonstrate adherence to the previous SSP may result in future failed assessments. Now, I think future failed assessments, what a term that is. I feel like that's also what made you start spiraling. It's that last paragraph there. So do you want to talk about what came into your brain when you heard that, and some of the concerns regarding
Well, at
that?
first, it sounds very logical. If you're not doing the change management correctly when they come in to redo it, they're going to fail you on it.
Yeah.
Okay? Totally get that. So what does right look like? Just think about that for a second. Does right look like a time machine going back in time and then making those changes correctly? I don't have a time machine, do you? So you can't go back and make those changes correctly. What you could do is go back through and identify how you didn't follow your change management process correctly when the assessor determines that you haven't followed it, and throw yourself on the mercy of the court to talk about how you're going to try to do better, right? That you're going to try to follow that. But the sin's already been committed, perhaps months, if not years ago. You can't go back and just like erase it. It's already been done.
Yeah,
So,
you can't negate it anymore. Like
right.
It's shown in the past, and it is what it is.
And let's make some assumptions here. Let's assume that you had a good process that allowed you to pass originally. You just didn't follow it. You just didn't follow it correctly. But it's still there. The process still exists. You just didn't follow it. So now what do you do as assessor? You fail them because they didn't follow it. But when they come back for reassessment, it's still there. The fact that they didn't do it didn't change. How are they going to prove to you now that they are doing it right? Looking at,
do they have to make a change again and then remediate?
Right. Let's say that they follow. We're just throwing out some potential things. Let's say that they didn't follow the significant change approach. Let's say that they changed MSPs. Okay. And they didn't go through the assessment, but they did do a change control, but they didn't go through a self-assessment, and they went through another 2 years. And they had changes, and those changes were done correctly, but they did not declare it a significant change. And you come back to the C3 and you're like, whoa, dude, You change your MSP. Like, you changed even how you did your SSP and
Yeah.
the relationship. Your matrix even changed with this MSP. That is a
Oh my
significant
gosh.
change.
Yeah.
But I do see that you have followed change management correctly, except for that. Like, what do? Do you just
Do they
fail them?
fail them?
You
Like,
just fail them?
yeah. Like, what if like their environment is up? Let's say their environment is fully perfect, 110
Right.
compliance at that moment, and you're gonna fail them for the past
The
mistake of
past. Right.
see,
Right.
and this is why the sentence results in a future failed assessment is
Right.
scary, you know?
Yeah, like, because if you think about it, okay, so you tell them they did it wrong. So is this just punitive? You have to fail them at least once, but then once they come back, you're like, it's okay. We already failed you once. You paid your price, your penalty, your failure tax. Now we'll let you go through because you're doing the change management and correctly. It's just
Mhm.
that one that you did, which was a significant change, you didn't do right. So
Right.
I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. I don't know what the answer is for
Yeah.
that.
Is it just basically they wanna force you basically just have to do, no matter what, another assessment for that specific significant change, no matter if you wait to the 3 years or not. Even if you waited to the 3 years, they would fail you because you didn't do it for that, so you'd still have to do another one anyway. It's like you don't get away. No matter what, they want you to do an extra assessment for that significant change.
And I think the reason why they want to see that is because during that transition, if you make a significant change, you've introduced significant risk, and none of that has been appropriately mitigated or worked through, and the contracts haven't been informed about those. So that system that was authorized for CUI has now become in question because of
Right.
these massive changes, and they want to see how long that has happened. And that brings up another question.
Mhm.
How long do you have to wait before you have to get reassessed? Let's say that you've identified it is a significant change. A year? 2 years? There's no date on that. There's no expiration on the time
Yeah,
frame.
so if you wait 2 years and you come back still before your level
Right.
2 reassessment, are you okay? Could you
Yeah.
go a few days before you have to renew every 3 years and be fine and not get a fail? Or
And these are things that I think should be defined by the C3PO themselves instead of them throwing their hands up and going, I don't know. I'm just gonna, we'll
okay,
just let
yes,
whatever assessor they
yes.
talk to in our organization kind of pick. You, as a C3POs, you should set the bar of where you feel like it should be, um,
Mhm.
and be careful for what you ask for. If you keep putting pressure on the DoD to tell you what you want to hear in your definition, you might get the answer you don't want to hear. So
That is absolutely true.
they're giving you the purview to make those choices to work, and the affirming official also has that choice.
Yeah, so
So
maybe
you
take it
can
while you can.
counsel, you can counsel them from the perspective of like, here's how we would rule on this, and then the affirming official can determine how they would want to do it and make their choice. Because
Yeah.
technically, they could shop other C3POs and find one that might find that that's not a significant change. Think about that, right? So one C3PO that says it's not, if you just shop around, you might find one that says, no, I don't see it that way. And you're like, cool, you're going to do my assessment in 3 years,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly,
And that kind
exactly.
of stuff is happening right now. People are doing that.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's, a lot of people want to sweep that a little bit under the rug, but it's still happening.
Mhm.
And so that's something to think about too. So you've got to think about the consequence to those types of changes. And
Mhm.
again, I think it goes back to talking to the C3PO again, but you have to start to consider um, those types of things. Like if you were a C-suite person, Kaleigh,
Yeah.
and you went to the C3PO, you did your due diligence, and they said, okay, I'm going to determine that this is a significant change as the CEO or managing partner of a company, then what do you do next? What would you think? How would you handle that?
If the C3PO told me that it was a significant
Mhm.
change, I would probably go for a second opinion
Okay.
first,
That
just to
sure.
make sure.
That's smart. Then what would you do? Let's say that your second opinion says, yeah, it's going to be a significant change.
I'd probably start to create a operational plan of action or some
Yeah,
sort of
plan it out.
plan.
Start to think how you're going to do it.
Yeah,
Now you're going to have to set a time frame. You're going to have to start communicating with the C3PO to think about how you're going to do it. I would highly recommend you stay within a 1 year time frame
yeah.
because that's usually the time frame at a minimum that the bar that if you look at in Rev 2 when they've said define at a certain interval, the maximum time frame that has been a consensus is a year.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, that's why you affirm every year, right? If you
right,
think about it, if you think about it
affirming is a
logically,
year. So
if
I
you
think if you
if you
look at
don't do
that,
it, if you don't do it within a year, are you going to affirm the 110 compliance without
you
saying
shouldn't.
so?
Maybe.
Here's that the decision of you're affirming and your SPRS score inside of the website, and you're checking all the boxes to affirm. Is that bad that you did all of that without updating or sharing that you had a significant change during that time? Is that
Yeah, and I think
is there a box for that in SPRS right now?
no. So what you can do is the operational plan of actions, like you were talking about, you set in place.
Yeah.
You can affirm that you're following your processes, even though you may not have all of them at 110. You're affirming that you are compliant with your system that you have. Vince Scott had a really good article where he talked about that, and he sort of walked the line of trying to say things without being like mega, like this is biblically like this is how it has to be. But I think you can walk a line where you affirm that you've passed because you're going through that change and you're following your SSP, you're following your processes, and 32 CFR provides guidance that that's possible for you to do. It's just you've got to have that process defined and you're working through it. It wasn't there's no thing to see here way of doing it. So you've gone through, and so now you're moving through that process of doing it. But so let's say that you started your significant change in November, right? And you actually did your assessment and passed your third party in January. So, and your significant change is going to take 6 to 8 months, right, to go through. You're going to hit your affirmation date through that mid transition. So you'd have to affirm as you're going through it. So that's another thing you have to work through. How am I going to make sure I feel comfortable with my operational plan of action, that I'm following these processes, I'm following the SSP, I've talked with my C3PO, I've talked with my affirming official, I've defined everything. That's not in stone written about how that goes, but you're going to have to walk it and make sure you have a peace in your heart about how you do it and be prepared to defend it if someone calls it into question.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Now, the other side that I was just curious about throwing out there is, for the people that might not be fully involved in the CMMC ecosystem and who read all the documents. Is there a document that speaks directly to a C3PAO that stumbles upon an organization that did not share the significant change or the update with maybe their contracting officer or person, their PO, and do they like report them in some way, or do they just like snitches get stitches sort of thing, and they just like moonwalk out of it and just say I didn't see it? There's not. I haven't seen a assessment guide that specifically speaks to this topic of what to do as the C3PAO.
Okay, so I just want to repeat back what I think I heard. So, are you saying would the C3PO have a requirement to report you if you did not do a significant change like you were supposed to, and you ran for a period of time
For a contract that required
for a
it.
contract that required it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you think about it, would you go to a CPA if they're going to report you to the IRS if you did something wrong? Right? I mean,
Right.
that's real life.
Do
Like,
you
would
walk
you?
into jail after you killed somebody? Or
Right. Yeah.
do you
Yeah. I
avoid
mean,
it?
the C3PO is they're an organization, a business who has their own responsibility and requirements, and they're not required by law to report it. Now, they're all false claims acts that someone inside their organization, if they did see it, they decided I could report it and let's see what happens. But that would be to the individual,
Mhm.
not to the organization.
Not to the organization.
So that's some very muddy waters because no one is going to want to go in and do that. That's part of the reason why you have, your defendant to defend you, right?
Yeah.
To say, okay, we're going to give you that best. If when the C3PO is going to come in, they're going to assess you. if they're going to literally report you to the DOJ if they have any problems, even when they go to through assess you. I mean, that's pretty scary to do
Yeah.
that. So
And some people, they bring up this conversation, they think it's so black and white, that it's so easy. Like, oh, that person's not responsible for it. Who cares? But if you're the C3PAO, or even an example of you're the MSP that left a CMMC level 2 certified client, or was removed from that environment, do you have to do something to cover your butt so nothing happens to you? People would say, if I said that, they'd be like, your system is not the one getting assessed. It's the
right,
client, it's the OSA. Right, that's true, but that doesn't remove them from suing you, right? Or trying to do something or attempting something.
yeah,
Right.
right,
And so there's still like muddy waters. And in my opinion, I think lawyers are starting to get all over the CMMC thing because it's becoming very interesting. So just like a heads up for you as an organization to really think through these things and what you're going to
yeah,
do and track as an organization because of how sketchy and risky these situations could potentially be.
yeah. So I think to kind of boil down, I think what you're saying is if an MSP was if they were transitioning away from a client, they would probably want to protect themselves from blowback if they don't handle that transition correctly. So a smart play would be, hey, we just want to let you know our shared responsibility matrix is now null and void at this date when this new C3PO comes in. You have responsibilities to follow your change management process and determine whether it's a significant change. I would try to make sure you have that in writing, that you've sent it and notified them that, because now, granted, you're not providing consulting to them anymore. So it's not your responsibility to inform them about their bad choices in the future. They have to do that themselves. But you might, like, I heard a cop say it the best, you might beat the rap, but you won't beat the ride. So you might
That's
win your
right.
court case, but you still could get sued. So,
Yeah.
but if you create good documentation to kind of help sure up early conversations, if they start sniffing about how they might want to hold you liable, and you're like, here's stuff that's saying that ain't nothing to us. If they've got good counsel, they're gonna be like, look, there's nothing here for you to do you're on the hook here. They crossed their T's and dotted their I's. I mean, if you want to pay me and then you still lose, that's up to you. But that's how a good counsel would handle that with them. And so having that documentation could help those early discovery processes be a lot easier to kind of ward off continued approaches from that
Mhm.
person that had made an unwise choice and transitioned and didn't share. And now they're having contractual remediations and they're pissed and they want to hold somebody accountable. So,
Yeah.
but again, the 32 CFR says it's on you, Mr. or Mrs. Affirming Official. So if it's your company, you made those choices. That's on you to make that choice ultimately.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you brought up documentation for both of those sides that we talked about. For the OSA that's experiencing that significant change, the documentation process, and getting to another, a reassessment at a timely fashion
Yeah.
is key there to be able to track what's happening in your environment, that an assessor could come in and understand what has happened is very important. So make sure to keep the evidence, the documentation, as well as you're somebody like an MSP on the outskirts of it that's a part of the process, or a C3PAO. There's all of it. I think has to do with really keeping track of those things and the documentation components, and being honest, which we know everybody in the ecosystem is. So
Well, I
um,
think I would like to see a C3PO share their perspective about the FAQ if they've gone through and done an assessment
mhm.
and they have found this is, our kind of Kobayashi Maru no win scenario here would be that they follow change control normally, but when they made the significant change, they did not follow it. You come to assess them, and that significant change was a year ago, and you discover it in your phase one. What do you do? Right? I would hope to God you would discover it as a C3PO in phase one. Right? If you didn't, then what the crap are you
I
reviewing?
mean, it's a significant change for a reason. It's significant, it's big, so you should see it, right?
Right. And a mature C3PO should they should, when they saw that FAQ, they should be like, okay, we're adding this to our questionnaire when we're going through and doing our reassessment, because they want to look for potentials for the significant change. But let's say you find it in phase 1. What do? They can't go back in time and fix it. How do they address it? What do you do? Like, you just talk about it and shake hands and say it's not a big deal? Like, it happened.
Sing
It
a
was
song
done.
about it around a
Right.
campfire and move
The
on.
body's been buried. You can't resurrect them now.
Yeah.
So, and I'm just really curious, what would a C3PO do? I don't know. I don't know how I would handle that. I would really like to have an answer to that question.
Okay, well, we might have to reach out to somebody, or if you are one, maybe comment down below and
Yeah,
say that you
that would be
can talk
great.
about it, because that would be really cool. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would love to hear that as well. I mean, I think coming from an organization that's going through this process that is CMMC Level 2 certified and would like to keep their Level 2 certification, we care about this stuff and how it's going to be
Yeah.
addressed. So,
I mean, you can fail them, but you fail them once,
do we come
but
back
it's still,
tomorrow?
you come back to, it's still the same problem. Right? So you just fail them again? Like,
Next week, is it going to be okay?
yeah,
So could I
right.
maybe meet with you then?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that.
Yeah.
That's a tough
Okay.
one.
Yeah, interesting stuff. All
Yeah,
right,
the
guys.
best punch not to get hit with is the one you dodged. So don't be there. Make good choices, folks.
Yeah.
Do not put yourself in that situation.
Yes, absolutely. Do not, please. Well, I'm going to link all the stuff that we talked about, 32 CFR, as well as the FAQ down below. And also, if you're watching this, you'll see them up on the screen. But make sure to go to YouTube if you want to see the visuals as well while we're talking about them. Please make sure to comment. Hey, if you're a C3PAO with experience that you want to talk about it, let us know. We want to hear about your guys' perspectives on how you took the FAQ and what your thoughts were about it. This is part of the infancy of CMMC right now in the ecosystem. You're going to be seeing these things. You have seen them, and you will probably continue to see them for a little bit. So we hope you guys enjoyed today's episode of us talking about this stuff. Again, we're going to say at the end of this episode, we're not claiming CMMC Jesus for any of the stuff that we talked about at the end. That was not written down in actual writing. So it's just our thoughts and our conversation that we took as an MSP that's going through this. So make sure to tune in next Thursday for another episode of Climbing Mount CMMC, the podcast. But until then, guys, as always, remember to keep on climbing. See ya.